Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from one of Spain's most revered saints, Saint Teresa of Avila, a spirited doctor of the Church. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week as we read from Saint Teresa's book, The Interior Castle. Hey, Catholic pilgrims, it's that time to journey with Saint Teresa through the interior castle. We have now entered a realm that is getting crazy deep. I have never experienced rapture, and so I have nothing to offer in the way of personal insight. This is also, like many of you, my first time really reading about rapture. Growing up, to me, rapture was just a word that crazy cults used to describe being swept up by aliens. So this is all new to me. And believe me when I tell you, it's stretching my brain, probably just as much as yours. But we are in this together, and together we shall prevail. Imagine for a moment of going your whole life only ever eating vanilla ice cream and not even realizing that there are other flavors. Imagine only listening for your entire life to the song Mary Had a Little Lamb and never realizing that there were other more complicated, beautiful, impactful songs out there. Imagine if the only smell you ever smelled was cut grass, and you had no idea that there was the smell of coffee brewing, bread making, roses, or the heavenly scent of a newborn baby's head. It's impossible to imagine that, right? Because we know it's not how things are. There are more flavors of vanilla ice cream. There are millions of more interesting songs than Mary Had a Little Lamb. And we all know that there are more smells than cut grass. Some good, some bad. Not only do we know that there is more to life than vanilla ice cream, Mary Had a Little Lamb, or the smell of cut grass, we actively want to experience more sensations than just the foundational level stuff. We want to engage our senses in a wide plethora of sense experiences. Many of us don't feel like it requires too much courage to venture out and try new things. For the most part, there are a lot of things people refuse to eat or things people refuse to try. But for the most part, people try to be adventurous. But when it comes to the spiritual life, there can be a tendency to want to stay stuck in our comfort zone, to just do the basic things to get by. Why? Why does it take such courage to walk through these mansions and grow closer and closer to God? Well, that's what we'll talk about on the other side of our readings. Our readings today will be from the 6th mansion, chapter 5, numbers 1 through 7. And go ahead and grab your books and we'll get started. There is another form of rapture, which, though essentially the same as the last, yet produces very different feelings in the soul. I call it the flight of the spirit, for the soul suddenly feels so rapid a sense of motion that the spirit appears to hurry it away with a speed which is very alarming, especially at first. Therefore, I said that the soul on whom God bestows this favor requires strong courage, besides great faith, trust, and resignation, so that God may do what he chooses with it. Do you suppose a person in perfect possession of her senses feels but little dismay at her soul being drawn above her, while sometimes, as we read, even the body rises with it? She does not know where the spirit is going, who is raising her, nor how it happens. For at the first instant of this sudden movement, one does not feel sure it is caused by God. Can it possibly be resisted? No. Resistance only accelerates the motion, as someone told me. God now appears to be teaching the soul, which has so often placed itself absolutely in his hands and offered itself entirely to him, that it no longer belongs to itself. Thus, it is snatched away more vehemently in consequence of its opposition. Therefore, this person resolved to resist no more than does a straw when attracted by amber, nothing you may have seen. She yielded herself into the hands of Him who is Almighty, seeing it is best to make a virtue of necessity. Speaking of straw, doubtless it is as easy for a stalwart, strapping fellow to lift a straw as for our mighty and powerful giant to elevate our spirit. It seems that the cistern of water of which I spoke, but I cannot quite remember where in the fourth mansion, was formerly filled gently and quietly, without any movement. But now this great God, who restrains the springs and the waters and will not permit the ocean to transgress its bounds, lets loose the streams, which with a powerful rush flow into the cistern, and a mighty wave rises, strong enough to uplift on high the little vessel of our soul. Neither the ship herself nor her pilot and sailors can at their choice control the fury of the sea and stop its carrying the boat where it will. Far less can the interior of the soul now stay where it chooses, or force its senses or faculties to act more than He who holds them in His dominion decrees. As for the exterior powers, they are here quite useless. Indeed, I am amazed, sisters, while merely writing of this manifestation of the immense power of this great king and monarch, then what must be felt by those who actually experience it? I am convinced that if His Majesty were to reveal Himself thus to the greatest sinners on earth, they would never dare to offend Him again, if not through love, at least through fear of Him. What obligations bind those taught in so sublime a manner to strive with all their might not to displease such a master? In His name I beg of you, sisters, who have received these or the like favors, not to rest content with merely receiving them, but to remember that she who owes much has much to pay. This thought terrifies the soul exceedingly. Unless the great courage needed was given to it by our Lord, it would suffer great and constant grief, for looking first at what His Majesty has done for it, and then upon itself. It sees how little good it has performed compared with what it was bound to do, and that the paltry service it has rendered was full of faults, failures, and tepidity. To efface the remembrance of the many imperfections of all its good deeds, if indeed it has ever performed any, it thinks best to forget them altogether, and to be ever mindful of its sins, casting itself on the mercy of God, since it cannot repay its debt to Him, and begging for the pity and compassion He ever shows to sinners. Perhaps He will answer as He did to someone who was kneeling before a crucifix in great affliction on this account, for she felt she had never had anything to offer God nor to sacrifice for His sake. The crucified one consoled her by saying that He gave her for herself all the pains and labors He had borne in His passion, that she might offer them as her own to His Father. I learnt from her that she at once felt comforted and enriched by these words, which she never forgets but recalls whenever she realizes her own wretchedness and feels encouraged and consoled. I could relate several other incidents of the same kind learnt in conversation with many holy people much given to prayer, but I will not recount them lest you might imagine they relate to myself. I think this example is very instructive. It shows that we please our Lord by self-knowledge, by the constant recollection of our poverty and miseries, and by realizing that we possess nothing but what we have received from Him. Therefore, courage is needed, sisters, in order to receive this and many other favors which come to a soul elevated to this state by our Lord. I think that if the soul is humble, it requires more valor than ever for this last mercy. May God grant us humility for His name's sake. I asked before the reading, why does it take such courage to walk through the mansions? I think a big part of it is that we want to retain a certain level of control over our lives. To surrender completely to God is a scary thing because in reality, we really want to do what we want to do for the most part. We also don't know what will be asked of us, and that scares us. Will God call us to the religious life, foregoing a spouse and kids? Will God call us to have more than 1.5 children? Will God call us to evangelize and not just keep our spiritual life a, quote, personal private relationship with Jesus, unquote? Will God call us away from all that is comfortable and familiar to go elsewhere for a purpose He has in mind for us? We just don't know. Our Lady is such a great example of surrender for us. Imagine the courage it took to accept getting pregnant with Christ, not by her husband, and then having to explain that to Joseph and others. Imagine the courage it took to flee to Egypt with Joseph and leave everything behind. It's one thing to up and move here in the 21st century. It was a very different thing back when Mary and Joseph were leaving everything behind to go start a life for several years in Egypt. Imagine the courage it took to watch your beloved son travel around preaching the good news and watching the scribes and Pharisees despise him and not really being able to do anything about it. And then imagine the courage it took to endure his passion and remain there at the foot of the cross with him. I can't even handle watching my children get shots, and yet Mary stood and watched all Christ's suffering, knowing that it had to happen. St. Teresa says, quote, "I am convinced that if His Majesty were to reveal Himself thus to the greatest sinners on earth, they would never dare to offend Him again, if not through love, at least through fear of Him," unquote. I get atheists to comment pretty frequently on my social media sites, and I've heard them say numerous times, why doesn't God just show Himself plainly to me? If He was real and He did that, then I could believe in Him. But the thing is, I don't think they actually desire that from God. Deep down, we know that if we came face to face with God, we would necessarily have to change our lives. And the hard truth is that they don't really want to go looking for God, because He does reveal Himself to us all over the place. They don't want to go looking for Him because they don't want to actually give up the way that they're living. There are certain things that they want to continue engaging in, and they lack the courage to find out what a life with God looks like. And so we must ask ourselves, Catholic pilgrims, what might be holding us back from moving through the mansions to arrive here at the 6th and ultimately the 7th mansion? Where is our courage lacking? And why is it lacking? I think these are very good questions to take with us today and ask ourselves. So that is all for today. Realize that the more we give ourselves to God, the more blessings and favors we will receive, and we will be strengthened to do what we were made and born to accomplish in this life. Have a great day. I'll see you back here soon. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.